We often glamorize those things and we hold up the success stories, but there's nobody out there talking about the real struggle of being a starving artist in the Christian world.
And now for the next episode of Letters from Home, sending encouragement to your doorstep by capturing the heartbeat of God's people, one story at a time.
Have you ever wondered what it would be like moving to LA to pursue your dreams of filmmaking? It sounds glamorous, but is it? Today's guest brings us on that journey, his journey from the bottom up. So many dreams fulfilled and so many images shattered. We get to peek behind the scenes and see the way our loving God has used it all to grow his faith and shape his worldview of the church and current mission in life. And in the PS, you'll hear some great tips on improving your audition process and one place in Wyoming that is a must visit most people don't know about. Here is the everyday extraordinary Chris Staron. Chris Staron, I'm so happy to have you on the show today.
Thanks.
And to get your story out. You have been one of the great blessings, you and Eric, and being involved with Christian Podcasters Association. And I've wanted to have you on for a long time, and I'm so happy we get to have your story out today.
Oh, thanks for talking to me. I love talking to you. You're sort of this bright spot on the Facebook group. It's so nice to see all your posts and things. I don't know how you do it, honestly.
Yeah, well, it's just a certain part of my service for God is just being over there on CPA and just
nice.
You've got the amazing podcast, Truth Podcast, which we'll talk about more later. But I also know you have a story besides being a podcaster, that you have a life, and
yeah,
and you're a bus driver right now, right? That's one of your jobs.
Right. I wanted to get the most glamorous job I could get, where you got the money and the attention from women and all that. So I went for bus driver.
And how's that working for you?
I don't see the money or the women. I don't know what happened. I think somebody lied to me. Yeah.
But you get to see the kids, and you get to see the beautiful landscape of Wyoming. I see your pictures on your socials, and I'm like, what? Where do people live? Yeah.
It's been a godsend. Yeah. The outdoors have been kind of a great means of therapy for me, just to kind of get out there and get away from things. And yeah, it is a blessing, so that when you're driving a bus full of like 50 screaming kids, you can look up and just imagine yourself in those mountains and be like, okay, this weekend I'm going to get up there. It's not always going to be like this.
Chris, let's get right into your story. So what was it like in your childhood?
Yeah. My parents are both very hard workers. They own a small heating and air conditioning company. And as part of that, we were all kind of part of the company. We helped out whenever they needed help. Our mom also she's a dynamo. So we were homeschooled I was homeschooled, my twin brother and I, from fourth and a half grade until high school. And she was running the business. She's an owner of the business. She's also the head of the office, and she was homeschooling us all at the same time. So our homeschooling would have to take a break whenever the phone rang, because she had to answer it, because it could be a customer. A very industrious family. So sometimes I'm like, how is it that I've gotten to be able to, do podcasts and movies and books and stuff like this? Oh, it's because my parents, never sit down. They're just kind of always doing something. We were really blessed with that, and grew up with a lot of forest behind the house, which was kind of awesome. So even now, as I'm stomping through the forest every weekend out here in Wyoming, in Ohio, where I grew up, it was just like we were out in the back playing in creeks and building forts out of dirt and sticks and stuff.
The good old days, right? The good old days before electronics took over everybody's childhood.
Yeah. And if God ever grants me kids, I honestly don't think I'll let them have electronics, because I think that's so important to be outside and explore and to create a sense of wonder and imagination. As far as the faith journey stuff goes, my distinct memory of it was that our dad went to what was called a renewal. It was like a men's weekend away. And it was a very intense weekend with guys sharing their testimonies and their stories, and very intense lessons and songs and worship and stuff. And that was sort of the moment where I saw my dad get invested in his beliefs. And we had been going to church and stuff before that, but that was sort of the moment where I realized that that was what he was doing, and we started getting more involved in church, and they were youth group leaders. And by the time I was 10 years old, I live right near a ski resort, and this is going to play into it, I promise. When I was 10 years old, I was learning to ski. I was on the bunny hill, and I did a full rollover trying to learn, and
Oh
just
no.
hurt my neck, and I was all sore and angry. And that night, as I was trying to recover from this, my mom's like, "We're going to go see a play." And I was like, I don't want to go see a play tonight. I'm in pain. And it ended up being a show called Heaven's Gates and Hell's Flames, which is exactly what it sounds like. It's, one side of the stage represents heaven, one side represents hell, and you kind of
Mm.
experience the last few minutes of some fictional people as they're just about to die, and then you see that judgment as they go left or right. And that was kind of all my 10-year-old brain needed. I was like, okay, I obviously want to go to the heaven side of the stage and not to the hell side. By the grace of God, went forward that night, and people say, those heaven and hell conversions, oh, it doesn't work. That's not helpful to anybody. I beg to differ. And some volunteers afterwards gave me a Bible, just a New Testament. I started reading that New Testament, and that sort of sparked the beginning of me reading the Bible for myself, which is a real gift.
That's great.
Yeah,
Absolutely. I remember it's probably a little more of an 80s thing too. There was a little more emphasis on hell in the
there was.
gospel. And I remember watching A Thief in the Night.
Yes,
I don't want to be left behind. I want to,
right.
yeah. So there was a little bit of fear, which I don't think I think we could maybe use a little more of that in our society
Yeah,
nowadays. There's
it's
not
a tough
that
balance.
awe. Yeah,
Yeah, it's a tough balance. When I was in high school, they also had local churches would do at Halloween, they would do a haunted house that was hell themed. And so you would go through it, and it would have a very clear gospel message. It would also be very scary, a very creative way to tell a very hard truth. We like to pretend oh, we shouldn't tell kids that kind of stuff. It's but it is the truth. That is what the Bible says is the reality of the situation. So,
for sure. So your twin,
yeah.
which is exciting, where was he at in his faith journey at the time?
It was the same exact thing, believe it or not. So the same play, the same walk forward, all that stuff.
That same night.
That same night. Yeah, yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, so that's been actually kind of great having a twin brother. It's like a built-in accountability partner. We still live together. Actually have bunk beds still, which is hilarious. I'm 38 and still have bunk beds.
Hey, so long as you don't have the Star Wars sheets, if you're like,
No.
if you've grown up and in the bedding choice, then it's it's a win. No.
Yeah, but it's a single man. Nobody cares. I mean, it's not like anybody but us is going to see the sheet. So anyway, but he's a total godsend. So I ended up making both of the films with him, and we've lived together most of our lives. It's hard to find a good roommate, but a good roommate also helps bring the rent down.
Absolutely. I think it's
Yeah.
great. And so if we can go back to when you got saved, you both turned to the Lord, and you
Yeah.
said you got a Bible and that was a godsend. So, what
Mhm.
happened from there?
I started reading the Bible for myself, which is good. The one of the dangers of owning your faith for yourself, which everybody should face that danger, is you have the risk of becoming like a Pharisee and
Mm.
and using the Bible as a weapon instead of as what it was meant to be, as sort of a way of hope. And so in high school, that was sort of more my bent. I mean, I still had friends, and I still was doing all right. I'm going to tell the story in a future episode of Truce, but I was in a lot of high school theater productions after I went to just a normal public high school. We started praying before every show, musical or play. We would join hands in a big circle, but because our school didn't have a proper theater, we didn't have a proper backstage. So all the guys and the girls changed in the same big room. And if you didn't want to be part of the prayer circle, you hid in this little space behind these lockers. And that was it. And we would sometimes pray for those people in a way that was not godly. It was more, I don't know, claiming territory than it was actually praying for those people. And so I fell into some of those traps in high school, not always, but sometimes. That changed a lot when I eventually went to college and started meeting people who were very, very different than me. We did okay, but in that time, my brother and I started making videos, just like our own fun videos. We'd been making them for years at that point with friends, but we had like this closed circuit network of televisions in the school. And we were allowed to tap into that and play like a 3 to 4 minute video every Thursday. And that became what we called the Thursday show. It was very creative. And Nick and I, we made all of them. We were in charge of all that. We didn't have any supervisors or any technical help, anything like that. Nobody watched them before they went out. They just kind of trusted us to make these videos just for fun because we wanted to. And almost nobody watched, which has been a common theme throughout all of my films. But we enjoyed that. And that was kind of the thing that kind of pushed us into making films because we're like, oh, we really like doing this in high school. So, and it was a good way to make friends and to kind of gather people together. A lot of our friends ended up being the people who didn't have anybody else to talk to. Our group of friends was really ragtag, but it worked out for the videos. We tried. Yeah, we had a lot of fun, but we were both teased a lot in high school, picked on and bullied. But what was weird is it was almost never about anything we actually did. It was always about something that somebody else had done. Like our older brother was picked on a lot. And so we got the residuals, we got whatever was left over. So even in high school, our shows would be packed out. People would just come and see it. Like so many people would come and see them. And in 2 different shows, I played a woman, like a full on in dress, bra, everything woman, and never once got made fun of for that. I always got made fun of for something that my older brother did or some residual thing, or they called us like the Cheese Brothers. And it's like, nobody ever saw me eat cheese. So we just like struggled with that weird, like I didn't get like persecuted for being a Christian in high school. I got teased for stuff that had absolutely no connection with me at all. It was just like nothing I did.
Did anyone stand up for you or your brothers, or did it get to the administration level, or did you just kind of quietly deal with this?
The administration, and I work in a school district now. It's amazing how little school districts can do to bullies. And honestly, it's something that I think that really, really needs to be addressed because, if you look at the school shooters, a lot of these kids who do school shootings are kids who have been bullied. And it's because of the loss of a backbone in the school district that those kids are allowed to be bullied and that it pushes people to a hopeless place. Because we got to places where it felt really hopeless. I would bring things to the administration and nothing would happen. And you as a Christian are always supposed to turn the other cheek, but that's hard to do day after day after day after day. And I had 2 different people stand up for me on 2 different days, but it wasn't enough to stop it every day.
Right.
Eventually, by the grace of God, a lot of those people graduated. And by my senior year, it wasn't so bad. But especially on the school buses when I drive, I do not tolerate bullying at all. And I will go to great lengths to make sure that those bullies are kicked off the bus.
So you got one eye on the mountain and one eagle eye looking at all those kids and making sure they're respecting each other.
Well, to be clear, I have both eyes on the road. But
the road, yes. 4 wait, do you have 4 eyes? Okay.
Right, yeah. But I mean, you can hear it. You can hear it really well if you organize your bus right. You can hear what's going on. But by the grace of God, we did eventually graduate high school and got away from that.
So college must have been a great fresh start then in a way. Did Nick and you both go to the same college as well? Where did you go and what was your experience like?
Yeah, we went to Ithaca College in Ithaca, New York, with its more famous brother is Cornell University is in the same town. So we could look over and see their beautiful campus while we were on our brutalist design campus that's just ugly. It's an ugly school. But we went there for the film program because we wanted to shoot on actual film and not just on video, because anybody can pick up a video camera and work with it. But to shoot on actual film, especially back then when most movies were still being shot on film, was what we were going for. It was a very different experience for us. If there were any religious roots in the students, it was Jewish roots. We had a pretty strong Jewish population, but there were very few Christians. It was possible to be the first Christian that one of your friends would know. And so that was kind of a neat experience for us, that you'd walk into somebody who has no background or what they knew about Christianity was just what they'd seen on the news or in history books or something. It was on our hearts and our minds that we should be the exception to what they think of as a Christian. What they read in books is probably where Christianity has gone wrong. I wanted to try to go the other way. And so my brother and I, we had this campus crusade leader that we met at the end of my freshman year, who was a really godly guy and good at kind of sussing out what the good challenges were for us, what we needed to overcome. And so he started organizing this thing where Campus Crusade members would get to school early and help the freshmen move in. It's like carry stuff in and meet them, meet the parents. And then we carried little notepads and we would write down little notes to ourselves about what our interaction was, what their names were, where they came from, what their room numbers were. And then we would go back over the course of weeks and months to try to get them acclimated to school, but also as a witness and a testimony to people. That's the way to do it. Harder to do in COVID times, but
Actually, our son Josiah, he said there is a higher sign up for crew
oh,
during COVID than there was before COVID. People are
huh,
starving to get together. So they're having
hmm,
Zoom online, and then they're having get togethers, social distancing in San Diego, and it's bigger than before. It's
wow, praise
crazy.
God. Yeah, you
Yeah.
never know how God's going to use something. You
Yeah.
never know. We had a lot of growing experiences in that time. This was also like the first time that I'd really encountered Christian people who were Christian in name but not in practice or in belief.
Hmm.
And so upstate New York, as you may know, was part of what they call the burned over district. So when Charles Finney went through in his crusade, I believe it was the early 1800s, people got this sort of sense of ecstaticism and a revival and stuff, but they didn't have any wisdom or anything. And so there were all these cults that came up. Mormonism started in upstate New York. The first sex cults in the United States started up there. And it sort of just burned the people out so that it was really hard for anybody, like any real faith to take root. And so we could not find a church because of this. So you'd go, there were churches, but to find one that actually believed that Jesus is God was asking an awful lot. And even there were chaplains on our campus, and we had, I think, two when I was there, and neither of them believed in Jesus. And they were supposed to be the Christian chaplains. It's like, why are you
What?
here? Why are you wasting your life? And so we got into this interesting place where my brother and I were trying to speak to the board who would choose these chaplains and be like, listen, you're a bunch of pastors who claim to know Jesus. Why are you picking a chaplain who does not? Shouldn't that be like the only question you ask is, do you believe in Jesus? Like
Right?
that should be the
Oh
top of the
man.
page, What is your name? Do you believe in Jesus? That's what it should be. But so we couldn't go to any of their churches because we couldn't support their lack of interest in something that was so important. And so Nick and I went to, I think it was something like 70 churches in upstate
Whoa.
New York across the 4 years, well, 3.5, and couldn't really find one that we liked that was a God-fearing church and like biblically sound. But it gave me a really good idea of what the church is, because we went to all sorts of different denominations and things. But like there was one, I think it's called Lansing United Methodist Church. I don't think I'll ever forget the name of this church. Went there one time. We got there at the time it was supposed to start. It didn't start on time. And then the whole service, if you'll call it that, was basically they had a Native American guy stand up, talk about his Native American beliefs, and then sit down. Nobody refuted it. Nobody compared it to Christianity. They just broke, and that was it. That was the whole thing. It was like, what was that? That's upstate New York for you. It's a big mission field if anybody has a calling.
Is that where from there it kind of led you both more into the film industry?
Yeah. So we were studying film, and I made the classic mistake, by the way, of people who go into the arts and wanted to study that in college. I only studied film and didn't study something else to back it up, which is the classic mistake. You have to study something else, whether that's marketing or graphic design or something else. So yeah, anyway, we studied film. And then my brother and I started using our student films as an outreach to our classmates because we all had to watch them. You'd get together in a room of a few hundred people, and you would watch all the films. And so we used those as a testimony, trying to witness to our classmates. And at that point, Christian films had been made since the beginning of movies. Really, the Lumiere brothers made one about Jesus before there was sound, before people even moved the camera. They were making Christian films, or really had any grasp on editing, but we had never really seen one. We thought we were inventing an art form in a way.
That's cool.
Yeah, we didn't have a lot of the trappings of like knowing what the market wanted and stuff. We were just kind of trying to make a good movie. And so we made a bunch of independent Christian films. And then Nick and I both went out to Los Angeles to intern out there. So I interned on the Bernie Mac show, if you remember that on Fox.
Oh, of course.
Yeah. And then my brother interned with some cinematographer agents, worked on like a Toys R Us commercial back when Toys R Us was a store. All my references are so dated, but Yeah, we went out there, and then eventually after college we moved out to LA and worked in the secular film industry for about a year on shows like Hell's Kitchen, which may be the most known show that we worked on. I was just a production assistant and a lighting stand-in, but I did put on Gordon Ramsay's makeup once, so that's a
Ooh.
thing for his camera test.
Does he have a toupee? Is that like a hair? Does he have some hair pieces in there? I always wonder when you see that big wave, I thought something looks a
It
little bit
didn't.
sus.
I don't think so.
It's all real. Okay.
Yeah, well, at least it was back when, in 2004 or whatever that was, 2005. And that was kind of a thrill. We got to, again, you're carrying your faith into this environment that is
Yes.
it's not that I wouldn't characterize Hollywood as necessarily anti-God. It's that they just don't know who he is. Or that again, it was like college. A lot of the vision that people had was what they heard on the news. And they hadn't really met Christians who really believed it and could walk the walk. And so to go out there, it wasn't so much that they were against you, it was that you were an alien species.
Curious.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I had one guy get in my face once on a reality show, but he was the only one. It was kind of funny. I was working on this show, and it was a reality show, kind of just a trashy show, but I would sit every day next to this Muslim guy, and each of us would pray to our own God, and we would talk, and we were friends. And I filled in for him once when he had to go feed the meter, and I gave him rides to and from work because he was having car troubles. And then this other sound guy got in my face about how intolerant I was. I was like, I'm the one's like having meals with this Muslim guy, and you're here yelling at me for my beliefs. What?
Yeah, like, what?
I think you're the intolerant one, but he just didn't understand. But on the whole, people were generally very giving, pretty open to us.
That was my son's experience too. He did a show at the La Jolla Playhouse Theater, and sometimes there's improv scenes, and he's like, "Well, maybe let's not do this part. I feel a little uncomfortable with that, where you have to kind of set a boundary and just be respectful about it, so nobody feels bad, but it does bring a little different attention to you when you're making a different choices for things sometimes."
Right. Well, but if you're doing improv, because I'm an improv comedian as well, and we've been performing together. Well, when COVID started, we'd been performing together for 11 years.
Wow.
Which is pretty incredible. Just a lot of the same base people for that time, and just an incredible group of awesome people here in Wyoming. But we've had that experience where something dirty gets passed to you, and the thing you can do often is have your character play dumb, like they don't know what they're talking about.
Oh, yes.
Or if it's a euphemism that somebody's using, take the euphemism literally instead of as the euphemism. So there's a lot of different things, a lot of little tricks you can get away with in improv that you can kind of steer away from that stuff.
Awesome.
My brother and I think this is really important. If you're interested in doing something, go to where those people are who are doing it. So we really wanted to get into making Christian films and had no idea how that market worked at all. And so we heard about this Christian film gathering. And so we went to it. It was International Christians in Visual Media, which is still an organization, and met just a lot of people that eventually became very important to getting us into Christian films. So it was like Kevin and Bobby Downs, who made like The Moment After and The Visitation, Rich Cristiano, who did Blanking on the Secrets of Jonathan Sperry, Unidentified, those kinds of movies, Christian films. And I was in the room when the guys from Facing the Giants made one of their first deals. They'd shot the movie, but they hadn't sold it to anybody yet. And I was just, I didn't know who they were going to become. So it was just kind of exciting time. But I was at a dinner table with the Downs brothers, and I overheard one of their email addresses. And so I wrote it down.
Of course you did. Why not?
And here's the thing. I still to this day, if you go to a conference with me, I will go and sit with everybody that I can. I don't care who they are. I will sit at their table and I will snoop on the conversations, because that's how you make contacts. And I emailed them afterwards, because they didn't pay much attention to me when I was at their table. Afterwards, I emailed them saying, like, do you have a film coming up that I can work on? And so I worked as an intern with my brother on what became The Visitation, which is just a terrible, terrible movie based on a great book. Terrible movie. It was butchered. Clearly I'm over it. But in doing that film, and it was a pseudo-Christian film, we just met all these great contacts that that eventually led us to get to know Rich Cristiano better. He's this interesting sort of godfather character in the Christian film world, where he not only makes his own films, writing, directing, producing, he also distributes his stuff and other people's. And so he was very welcoming to us and encouraging us to make our own films and that he would distribute them. Pretty awesome. And then we had two different people offer to pay us to make Christian films, like they would back our films. And both of those fell through. As soon as we moved back to Ohio to make the movies, we moved to Ohio to keep the costs down because LA is expensive, and lived with our parents for 5 years, and on our own dime ended up making 2 independent Christian films.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, what an accomplishment.
I don't know. It's a lot of work.
What were the films that you made, and what did you learn from the process of making the films?
A lot of things. So Bringing Up Bobby is the comedy, and that was the second one we made, and Between the Walls was the first one. And it was a tough time because we started seeing the gang from Sherwood Pictures who made like Facing the Giants and Fireproof and all that. If you watch their behind the scenes, it was all like, oh, we prayed and God provided all this money, and there was this crew, and Kirk Cameron got involved, and nothing came through for us. It was really, really hard for us because, we would work all day on the films and then have to go like renovate houses with our parents. And, so it was just a kind of a long, dark period where, people, you get this in any kind of media, you get this in the podcasting world where everybody's like, oh, you just believe and God will provide the money. And it's like, well, for some people, yes, but for others, you may be on your own. The reality is that these things work differently for different people. Unlike the gang from Fireproof, the Sherwood Pictures guys, we did not go to a massive mega church. We went to little, tiny, small, working class churches. So like, well, people just don't have the money to give to those kinds of things.
Did you feel like you had the quality of actors you wanted? And did you feel like the story that you wanted to be told was being told while you were creating these shows? Because that's really important.
It's important. I think it is important, but I don't want to downplay the difficulty of being an independent filmmaker and not having money, because literally, like on a film set, my jobs were not just the writer, director, producer, but also the location scout. I approved the makeup. I was in charge of wardrobe. I had to light the sets. That was me. So it was like, yes, the stories could get told, but without the backing and the money and the expertise, everything fell on Nick and I.
What do you think suffered the most from your lack of funding as far as quality of production that would have changed?
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, what would have changed the most? We would have gotten a better camera. That's where I would have started.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
This was kind of a funny thing that everybody assumes that digital images have always been great. And you and I remember it is not the case. The really nice HD cameras came out right after we filmed our movies. And so everybody was always like, well, why don't you film on those cameras? It's like, because they didn't exist when we shot our movies. That's where I would have started. But also like just hiring a crew that knew what they were doing would have been really helpful. We had incredible actors for what the movies were, especially Bringing Up Bobby. We had an incredible cast, but they weren't paid anything. And that's one of those things that kind of still haunts me, is I wish that I had money that I could go back and pay those guys, but we didn't really make a lot of money on the movies. But it was one of those deals also where we encountered the difficulty of the Christian audience. We had just like killed ourselves making these films. And then you get these really bad critiques back from people. And then part of the problem is that Christianity is this giant umbrella collection. Like it means so many different things, from like Eastern Orthodox to even Mormons claim that they're Christians even though it's a different religion. And so you have this huge span, like people who wear, like goth clothes and go to screamo music, and then like really conservative ladies who won't uncover their hair and won't wear pants, So that is Christianity. It's this big umbrella. And so if you're going into that, you're going to try to speak into something that's very personal for people, but also that is incredibly diverse. And so because it's so personal to people, if something doesn't fit exactly what they think should be there, they can be very picky and they can be very vocal.
It sounds like you got a couple of early bad reviews. Do you think it just kind of, things didn't go well from that point? Do you think it could have gotten a broader audience had it had a better critique from the start?
No, the critiques weren't so bad. I was mostly just taking it personal, people are willing to attack you when they don't know what goes into it. What was the hardest thing was just people would always come up to you and say like, oh, you don't have to worry about the money because you're doing this for the Lord. It's like, but I think that we don't understand that the suffering that goes into those kinds of projects and the sacrifices that are made. It makes me think, if you talk to certain missionaries, we force missionaries in the United States to go from church to church begging for money. And sometimes they won't get enough money between churches to make it to the next church. But we make them sort of parade around in this little thing. And we say, oh, aren't they they are so holy to be able to live in such conditions and things. And isn't it amazing how God provided, they needed, like they were about to get kicked out of their apartment, and then God provided the $1,000 to get them through. I think a much better testimony would be, isn't it wonderful that our missionaries don't have to worry about money? and
Right.
and they don't have to worry about being kicked out, and they can just do the job. And I think that would be a much healthier attitude. But we've gotten so in love with these stories of rescue at the last minute that we don't realize that we should never let God's people get to that point in the first place. And that was what we kept experiencing, was everybody was willing to sort of Christianize everything, like baptize everything that we were going through as a godly struggle, but we're generally unwilling to help. Or some of the harshest critiques we got from people online were from people who pirated the movie. It's like, you didn't even have the courtesy to buy the movie. Why are you critiquing it? It's difficult.
It sounds to me like you don't feel like it was a success what you did.
Yeah, it's the part that I think was a success is the part that is, so we were in, I had to work a job also while we were making the movies. So I was editing video for the Cleveland Indians ballpark for the scoreboard department. And we got this email from our distributor that there was this guy in Brazil who was looking for DVDs. And because of this long story, Brazil was going through an economic upswing, and suddenly everybody wanted a DVD player. And because they wanted a DVD player, they needed DVDs. And so this guy, who I just met last year for the first time, had this idea that he would flood the market with Christian products so that the gospel would just get out there. And it would go into libraries and classrooms and that kind of stuff, because that's the only DVD that's around. So he got all these Christian films from the United States and translated them into Portuguese and had them sold there. So we literally, in one quarter, sold more copies in Brazil than we ever did in the United States in English. And so to me, that's the success of Bringing Up Bobby, is where, we didn't make much money at all, but, we sold like 40,000 copies in 3 months in Brazil. And who knows what that did down there. I mean, I don't speak Portuguese, so I can't, it's hard to browse the internet to find out if anybody liked it. And that to me was the success.
You're really inspirational to me and so many of our podcasting friends. And guys, if look Chris up on IMDb, he's got a huge list of all the things that you've done. You've acted, you've helped with lighting, you've produced, directed, you've done all these things. And that is an accomplishment and a success. And I like Bringing Up Bobby. I like the dynamic and the humor and the costuming.
Thank you.
I definitely will put that in the links where people can go check out your movie and purchase it and support our friends. So
right. Yeah. I don't want to sound like a downer, but I just want to be kind of realistic about what it's like out there.
Oh, absolutely. It's a great picture. And then you also did Cradle Robber.
Yeah.
So what was the writing process of that like?
Cradle Robber is a novel. It's on ebook, and it's something I published independently. After the movies, I was really wrestling a lot with anger, especially, and I still struggle with the things we say about God's provision in the church don't actually line up with the Bible or with reality. But we still have all these little things that we say all the time. And so I was really struggling with that stuff. And I was struggling, we were volunteering with Campus Life, which is like a ministry for teenagers. And I was really struggling with as a volunteer, I could present the truth, but I could never make somebody follow it. Which is, one of those hard things about any kind of ministry, is like you can lead the horse to water, but you can't make it to drink. We saw, a lot of people we'd invested in make really bad life choices. And so this book kind of came out of that in part. It is a guy who, seeing that like the people he's invested in make really terrible decisions, he throws away everything that's good in his life to spend a decade building a time machine so we can go back in time and try to force people to act like he wants them to be. And that was sort of me working through my desire to force people to act like we want them to be, which actually I think is something that we as the American church struggle with. We're always trying to force the country to act like we want it to, rather than go out there and do the hard work of actually sharing the gospel, of actually being the church. We would much rather just go out there and wield a hammer,
Or write a check, right?
Or write a check.
Instead of going next door to see our neighbor.
Right. Yeah. And that's how real ministry is done. I like to say this all the time. The guy who does the biggest ministry in our town here in Wyoming, he's not a pastor. He doesn't have a lot of money. He's not giving to great charities. He is the guy who works at the self-checkout line at the grocery store. He's this little guy from Romania who loves the Lord. And he tells people, God bless you. And he goes and he helps them. He invests in their lives. He has conversations. They put a picture of him on the newspaper, and it just went like all over Facebook. And people were like, oh, I love Florian. He's the best, and he prays for people. And he's just the self-checkout guy. And I think that's really where we could be focusing our ministry is more not about these grand gestures, but more like, what can I do like in the moment?
I've always viewed the bleachers as a really big mission field, and grocery stores as well. My kids work at the grocery store, and I love getting to know each of the people's names.
Yeah.
It's like, this is where I'm at. I'm at the grocery store now. I'm at the bleachers. So let's talk to the moms and see how they're doing. And when I get to talk about my life, the Lord's the biggest part of my life. And because I have a relationship, we can bring it up, right?
That's awesome. Yeah. Praise God. Yeah. You got to do that stuff. And that's one of the things it's hard doing the podcast and driving the bus is I don't actually have a lot of extra time to do that stuff. And that drives me insane, but
no pun intended, pun intended. Okay.
It does. Yeah.
You're talking about cradle robber. And then if you wanted to tie that into Trucidon.
Oh yeah. So the book and all that me struggling with anger and all those things really led to me starting the Truce podcast, which is what I'm doing now. And I love doing it because I have the ability to tell stories without having the expense of what I did in the movies, hiring actors and creating a visual image. It's much easier. But also I realized, like there's so much anger in our country.
Right.
I've started this 3 years ago. We just don't seem to understand how we got to where we are. And I think a lot of the times that's where the tension, the friction starts, is when we don't know our history and we don't know we're angry, but we don't know why, and Truce has been looking at a lot of those sort of undercurrents in Christianity, the things that glom onto Christianity, like pyramid schemes or political campaigns or even economic models. Our capitalism has really kind of clung onto American Christianity. And so just asking, like, how did that stuff get there? And how can we do better? And it's actually been really good for me in my faith because I left doing the movies kind of angry at the capital C church. And this has been kind of a way to learn how to love it and learn how to treat it less like some big, dark, ominous, well-organized thing off in the distance, like some empire, and realize it's this big umbrella with a lot of people who have a lot of diverse views, and to kind of shake my fist at some monolith doesn't really make sense because there is no monolith.
Yeah.
And also to see what the real work of the church is supposed to be and keep refocusing back on that. And that's really been very helpful. And I think that's really how God has provided all this time. It hasn't been through like fame and fortune and money or even being paid for what I do most of the time. It's mostly come from him helping me to see things. Using those experiences, like going to all those churches in college, helped me to see that diverse swing that we have in Christianity. Having to defend my faith in college and in Los Angeles because people didn't know what Christianity really was, helped me to learn to love people who were different than me, which is really a gift. And then struggling to make media for the church is what eventually led to Truce. Having to deal with all those difficult things, all that, the bad comments that we get on the internet and all that stuff has helped me kind of see where we're struggling. And that gives me topics for the show.
Absolutely. So would you say there's a verse that means a lot to you that has helped shape your vision, Chris? And then I also would love to hear what, because you're such a visionary, what's still on your bucket list?
So many things. Yeah. Okay. So the verse that my brother and I, when we were driving out to Los Angeles, kind of ended up settling on what became sort of a life verse for us. And that's from the book of Mark, where it says, so what does it benefit a person if they gain the whole world but lose their soul? Essentially, that's the idea. Because, that was on our mind a lot when going to LA, is like, you can get all the riches of the world out there, you can get all the fame you want, but people lose their souls left and right. That's been sort of a guiding force. It sort of kept both of us in check over the years. What are my real motives? It's a good question to ask. What's next? So I do have a gigantic bucket list of things that I'd like to cover on the show.
So just real
Yeah.
quick, so let me going back to what you said. So what is your real motive? What is your motive for truth and just
Yeah.
guiding you?
There's so many motives with truth. There are so many. I get more
Oh,
and more.
Chris, I love your laugh.
Oh,
You
good.
have such
Yeah.
a great heart and spirit.
Oh,
Yeah.
praise God. My hope with truth is to calm us down as a church, to stop being so angry at those people, whoever those people are to you, whoever's, bringing down this country or, ruining this faith. Because oftentimes if we label somebody as those people, that allows us to not have to witness to them and to not treat them as if they need Jesus too, just as much as I do.
Right.
And so that's one of the main goals, and protecting the witness of the church. Because we often forget that, I can have my political beliefs, I can have my ideas about the country, but when those things start to impact my testimony to other people, I really need to start examining that. My political beliefs can greatly hurt people, and it can turn them away from following Jesus because they say, oh, well, that's what a Christian's like. I don't want to be a part of that. One of my hopes with the show is to keep turning people back to how are my actions going to impact my witness?
Yeah.
Because as we'll get into at the end of season 3, when we export these ideas about the United States being this righteous nation that's godly to other countries, and then we force them to get our minerals for us at very low cost, or, we don't treat them with respect, or they see how we don't treat our own people with respect, they're going to be like, I don't want this Jesus. I don't want this God who makes people so angry and so evil to each other. So my hope is to kind of separate those things, just to help us to see who we really are and what we're really doing, so that we can eventually protect our witness.
Great. Well, I know the Lord's using your podcast to do that. I hear so much feedback from what people are saying, and it's given me many good things to think about too, Chris.
I
So
hope
we'll
so.
just keep trusting God for that. And so what's
Yeah.
on the horizon for you?
What's on the horizon? It's by the grace of God, more truths, hopefully. I want to examine in the next season, I want to see how fundamentalism came to be in the United States, Christian fundamentalism, what the history is of that, and what some of again, trying to protect our witness, how can fundamentalism blind us to our witness? Mm-hmm. And what people really need. Especially, I want to tell the story of William Jennings Bryan, who a lot of people know ran for president 3 times and then eventually helped prosecute the Scopes Monkey trial. In the process, he won the battle but completely lost the war. Mm-hmm. And so I want to kind of talk about that case. If that's what God grants me, so be it. That would be amazing. And I just keep praying that the Lord will allow me to do the show full time.
Before we seal up the envelope on this story of encouragement, I have prepared bonus material for you that we like to call the PS, sure to make you smile and be moved within your heart as you see a bit more of the heart and personality of our guest.
Here is your PS.
So, are you ready for some bonus questions?
Of course.
What would you say to somebody who is being bullied in a school today?
Oh, yes, absolutely. So obviously, you need to contact people who are in charge and try to hit the administration up. I would write down, keep a log of every single incident and be very specific. So you have specific dates and times and witnesses. But I would also say, sort of the fun trick way is that, let's say if Meg is bullying me, which she's not, I would go and try to find Meg's friends and become their friend. Because then your friends will tell you to stop picking on me, which is something I did in high school. I found out kind of late that this was an option, and I would become their friend. And then they would help me. But ideally, it is the school district should be helping you if you're being bullied, and hold their feet to the fire and leave a paper trail.
Do you think, Chris, that's something that you still Do you feel like you're over that from your childhood, or do you feel like that's something that still comes up for you?
I mean, it comes up the other thing that's hard to realize is that I realized as an adult that I was also a bit of a bully to other people in high school. So there was a moment,
Mm.
I think after maybe 8 years of being out of high school, I finally a group of people got together, and I got to go apologize to some of those people, and that was one of the best things I've ever done for me. To being selfish was just to go and apologize to those guys and be like, listen, I didn't even know I was bullying you until I thought about it after high school. And so in some ways I have to have grace to those people who bullied me because maybe they were in the same boat. The beauty of high school is that it's over and I live thousands of miles away from all those other people
Yeah.
and don't have to deal with it anymore. And high school's over. I did spend a lot of years praying through that. And I think that was the most beneficial thing was praying for those people in earnest and wanting the best for them. I think that was the most healthy thing. Yeah.
So good. So good. That changes everything, you know?
Mhm.
So we'll just talk about something a little more fun now. So did you
I know. I've been pretty heavy today, but
did you have any fun, like a fun family tradition growing up?
yeah, we did. So on Christmas Eve, all the guys would get together and we would drive to this mall. For some reason, we always went to this mall that was far away, not the one that was closed. But we would go there and we would people watch because Christmas Eve is the time when all the desperate men who forgot that Christmas was coming go out looking for anything at all to get to give their wives and girlfriends. So we would go out there and we would just people watch. And generally, we had all of our Christmas shopping done. But then we would go to Red Robin afterwards and we would see who could drink the most freckled lemonade, which is just lemonade with strawberries in it. And so
I
then
knew you had a dark side.
yeah, of course. Yeah. And there was no alcohol in it, but,
I know, I'm just kidding.
and then inevitably we'd have to stop for a bathroom break on the way home because I drank 7 in one sitting one day. That was my record. So yeah, my parents have always allowed us to have that kind of silly fun and kind of establish that silliness is okay in those kind of situations, you know. Like even my parents started a little food fight at our house once, and they started it. So I've always kind of admired that about them, that they were open to those kind of silly moments.
I love sometimes when we're at the dinner table and I make mashed potatoes and someone asks for more and they're right in the middle of a story and I take the spoon and I plump it like, so it's like 8 inches high or something. And then they look and then the whole table busts. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
that's awesome.
Life's too short not to have a great time,
Yeah, you
right?
got to be silly. I don't know how people can be straight laced all the time. You got to be silly.
So you spend a lot of time on the road. What do you love about being a bus driver and what's challenging about it?
Oh yeah. So I really like my coworkers. I've got a really solid group of coworkers. I have never liked coworkers like I like these folks. And so it's been a godsend to get to know these people. What's hard about it is that I really want to be doing the podcast and I'm being pulled away. So I will literally have to like stop mid thought and go drive a school bus. And that can be really frustrating, especially doing the kind of show I'm doing where it's so involved and takes so much time. Like I'll have a day off and I'll work on the show and I'll get so much done. I'll be like, why can't I do this every day? Yeah, it's really hard to walk away from the thing that you love. And I'm not the best with kids, especially not 50 at one time when I can't look at them. It's a
Yeah.
whole big challenge. I would say if you have a school bus driver, your kids get on a school bus, give them a Christmas gift.
Good to know.
Yeah, because it does make a difference. It just brightens the day, and also like just teach your kids how to be, genuine human beings and sit down and follow instructions. So yeah,
Say good morning.
say good morning, little decencies. Yeah, it does go a long way. One of the interesting things I've noticed, especially like working with teenagers and stuff over the years, is that you can judge a lot by a person by how they treat a blue collar worker. And even
Mm.
when I've gone on dates with people, it's one of my big things is like, is this woman going to treat the server with respect? Because I don't want to
Mm.
like date somebody who's not going to do that. And so as a school bus driver, that's one of the things when I've had buses get out of control and I have to give a speech, I talk to them about treating blue collar workers with respect. Because my parents were blue collar workers. I'm a blue collar worker. We often, even in Christian circles, if somebody is even financially struggling, we say it's because they're not working hard enough. But it's like, no, well, they could just be in a profession that doesn't get paid a lot or that doesn't have a lot of respect.
It kind of goes back a little bit to what you said earlier about there being all these misconceptions in the church too, as far
There are.
as almost like the prosperity gospel. If you believe God, then you're going
Mhm.
to be rich, or you're going to get to go to college, or all those things, and
Right.
it's not a package deal.
It's not. It's
And,
so
and it's
weird.
rude. It's rude to,
It is. It's insulting to say that somebody's not working hard enough just because they have a blue collar job and can't afford things. Even like my friends will sometimes like unknowingly like rib me about being cheap. It's like, yeah, but I don't make much money.
right,
And I'm taking this job so that I can try to do what I want to do.
right.
So I need those hours off in the middle of the day to work on it. So it's a tough thing in the church. We're really struggling with is money, and that prosperity has gotten into even our most like staunch conservative reform churches. Prosperity is there because we believe that like nothing bad could happen to you if you're a Christian. But if you look at the Bible, like the central character of the Bible is a guy who gets crucified for being exactly where God wants him to be. Paul
Right.
gets shipwrecked and bitten by snakes and beaten and thrown out of town for being exactly where God wants him to be. So I think our conception of what success is and what money is way off in the church.
Yeah. So you've worked with youth
Yeah,
too,
well, I
huh?
volunteered. I volunteered with teenagers quite a bit over my life, which has been fun. I taught high school boys Sunday school for 3 years with a friend of mine. I just think it's such a great age to reach people because they're asking such big questions. When we get to be adults, we stop asking great questions. There's that sort of innocence and joy in a high school, or even I actually really like working with middle schoolers because they still like adults when they're in middle school. you know?
Right.
They don't think you're a total idiot yet, and I love that about them. And they've inspired quite a bit of my work. Just hearing the feedback of what people don't get, what they don't understand, or even when we made Bringing Up Bobby, my brother and I made that film to reach out to a few kids in our campus life group. They were our audience. That's what we were aiming for.
Did they like it?
They
Did they see
did.
it?
Yeah, they did. They really liked it. And we like there's a couple goth kids in the movie. The central character Bobby is a goth kid. And we wanted
Yeah.
to make that in a Christian film. Having a goth kid is kind of who is intelligent and lovable as the main character is a huge step because they're usually portrayed as like terrifying. But in our group, we saw that they were like the smartest, most lovable, open kids, and like in fact, some of the goth clothing that our character wears in the movie was real. Came from one of the kids that we were volunteering with. So yeah, teenagers have kind of played a big role in it. I kind of wish I could still volunteer with them, but with the show and the job, I just don't have time anymore.
So what would you say to somebody who's starting out in acting? Do you have any tips for
Yeah,
them?
don't do what I did. Nobody wants to hear you have to find another thing to be good at. But you'll find that even in some of the biggest stars in Hollywood have side hustles, and that's for a reason. Because especially for women, there are so many women who are going into acting that your talent alone is not going to be enough to make you stand out. You need to also be a writer or a producer or work behind the scenes. If you're going to make your own content, you need to be study marketing or business or graphic design, something else that you can bring with it. Because if you can make yourself useful in more than one way, you are so much more valuable. I'd also say like when I was working as a production assistant, which is like the lowest level on a film set, I could tell somebody was useful if they could take the trash out without help.
Mm,
Because a lot of these guys, I would say, like say, can you take that trash out? And they would maybe just tie it up and leave it in the can. Or they would pull it out of the can and leave it next to it. And it's like, no, and those guys never got promoted because they were useless. Like you had to hold their hand to take the trash out. So I always tell people, like, be really good at taking the trash out in a kind of really small, dumb job that you think is insignificant because they need to be done. And if they're done well, people will trust you and will promote you. And that's a really hard thing to hear because like actors, we usually like, you think, oh no, I need to keep my art pure and stuff. Like, no, get the real experience of having a real job and working hard with your
hmm.
hands, and you'll actually be able to act better because you've been there.
What would be most important to you in the audition process?
Oh yeah, generally it was always when we were casting, it was always like, do they bring it to life? Do they bring something to it? Because some people, if they're just reading the lines, it's not really fun. We had people who read stuff completely differently than what we thought they would, and that they ended up being the people who
Hmm.
got it. Like the guy who plays Dennis in Bringing Out Bobby played the role way different than we'd written it, but it was like infinitely better. So just like come up with a
Mm.
strong idea and go with it. And then of course be willing to change if you get notes and things like that, but make a strong choice and go with it.
What would you say to someone who has taken that choice and gone with it, but then they don't get a role, or they find that they've gone to 10 auditions and not gotten any
Oh,
roles?
I would say you need to get a backup job in the industry that you're trying to go into. And I know,
Yeah.
again, that's terribly difficult to hear. People don't want to hear it, but it is such a great window into the process. Even if you're just going to be a production assistant on a film,
Mhm.
start at the bottom and learn. And you, honest to goodness, don't need any kind of background history to get a job in the film industry if you're going to start at the bottom. And people are generally willing to help you learn. It's just a matter of getting that first job. Be persistent, and you'll learn. You'll get to know producers and you get to know directors and things. And you may even find that you like working behind the scenes more. So,
Nice. Well, I'll ask you one question about
woo.
Wyoming and wind up with a couple of more
Mhm.
serious questions. So, what don't people know about Wyoming?
Yeah, so Wyoming is the home of Yellowstone. Most of Yellowstone is in our state. It's not even close to being the best part of Wyoming. The national forests around there and around Grand Teton and south of Grand Teton are much better than Yellowstone is. Much prettier
Hmm.
and way less crowded. Yellowstone's cool for the hot pools and the geysers and stuff, but that's like a day, right? If you can get away from that stuff, you're going to have a much better time.
And Chris, we've got to talk about truce. Say real quick where people can find you and which two episodes they should start
Yeah, you
with.
can find Truce anywhere you get podcasts or at trucepodcast.com. And I'd recommend starting with an episode called The Pledge of Allegiance, or the other one that's the Ad Council, CIA, and Christian America.
How about that for intriguing
Yeah, yeah.
topic? Truth is great. So yeah, I highly recommend. And also, you're right there. Where you're ever listening to Letters from Home, just search for Truth, and you could subscribe right now where you're listening. So, which character or person in the Bible do you most admire or relate to?
Jeremiah, the prophet Jeremiah, if you read him, he has basically 40 years of a wildly unsuccessful ministry by most standards that we'd have today. He goes out, that God gives him a message and he preaches that message. And people disregard him. They throw him in a well. It's kind of a rough story, but the man was faithful. And I think
Hmm.
that is such a great example for us that we can't, and maybe this is one of the things I struggle with. So I look up to him so much, is that we can't judge our success based on the numbers and people's response. Success in God's eyes is being faithful. That really should be my goal too.
Absolutely. Do you have a flaw that keeps you on your knees in prayer?
I have so many. Yeah, I have so many. But anger tends to be something, and I think especially a lot of guys struggle with it. And a lot of that comes up from like disappointments. Again, trying to compare myself to others and things when I really shouldn't do, but it happens. And so it bubbles up. That's one of the things that I pray about a lot. It's like, oh Lord, forgive me for saying that thing, or help me to make that situation right. That's the thorn in my flesh. Yeah,
Yeah, won't heaven be amazing? There will be no more struggle, like no
yeah.
more sin. I can't imagine that would be so
That
nice.
would be so
Um,
nice. Yeah.
what does being a child of God mean to you?
I mean, it's just one of those startling blessings where it just means like I don't have to work for God to love me. It just he does. And that's kind of an incredible thing for a guy like me who's so used to I'm a doer, I was raised in an industrious family and we do things, we make things, and to be loved by the Lord despite any of that stuff and without having to make something or earn something is just an incredible blessing. And so that's one of the main things I like to think about and dwell on in quiet times is like, Lord, how could you just love me without me having to do something? That's the one that I keep coming back to.
I trust that you enjoyed Chris's story as much as I do. One thing that stands out to me from what he shared was he has so many dreams and desires, and he just goes for it. Even if it means he has to work as a bus driver and live in bunk beds to make ends meet. I love his views on the church, and it really made me think how much power of positive thinking has influenced some of the things we say. And I'm just going to pray for us today that we look at our view of success and we also take the time to pursue some of the dreams God has laid upon our hearts. Patreon is a platform for creatives and their supporters. On Patreon, we like to share some extras with our Letters from Home members. If you Google Patreon and look up Meg Gleesner, you will see 3 sign-up options and bonus material and swag we only offer there. And all of the contributions from Patreon only go toward making every episode even better for our listeners.
Links from our guests will be in the show notes. For more everyday extraordinary faith stories, go to our website, lettersfromhomepodcast.com, and click subscribe or follow on whatever platform you're listening to.
2 Corinthians 3:3. And you show that you are a letter from Christ, delivered by us, written not with ink, but with the Spirit of the living God, not on tablets of stone, but on tablets of human hearts.
Until next time, go